Good morning, students. In the last class, I sent you these questions from NCRT to go through it. Today, we will discuss these important questions from the NCRT for your chapter 1, Indian Economy. The first question says, what was the focus of the economic policies pursued by the colonial government in India? What were the impacts of these policies? So, the motive behind the policies which were undertaken by the government, colonial government, that is British government, was to create India as a supplier of raw material for British industries, because at that point of time there was industrialization in Britain. The policies were to improve the development of Britain and its economic status. But it ignored India completely. India was just the supplier of raw material to Britain, and it was only reduced to a market in which finished products were taken from the Britain. So also the products which were sold in the Indian market, they were at a higher price, and the raw materials were taken from India at a very lower price. This further deteriorated the condition of Indian economy. So the first point, if we say, Indian economy witnessed very low economic growth. What do you understand by economic growth? It is the growth of income, per capita income or national income of a country. And if we see the facts, it was only 2% during that period, which is very low. So the British government was more interested in maintaining and developing the economy of Britain that we have earlier discussed. And in order to do so, it exploited India, and it also ruined the agriculture sector as well as handicrafts. Secondly, the second important point discussed the Indian agriculture. It was well developed before the advent of Britishers. We were able to suffice our demands as far as food grain is concerned. But during the colonial rule, because of commercialization of crops, that is, alluring the farmers to grow crops like cotton, indigo, which are commercial crops, instead of food grains, in order to get the raw material for Britain industries. This exploited the condition of Indian people due to lack of food in the country. Britishers destroyed the handicraft industry because they wanted to sell their own products in Indian market. So they followed the policy of deindustrialization. How did they do that? They imposed very heavy export taxes, that is tariff, on Indian goods, handicrafts, which were exported to other countries. Their price increased drastically and they lose their market in the international level. In this way, Britishers exploited. We have taken the points. First point is about the economic condition, second point is about the agricultural condition, And the third point tells us about the handicraft. Then, if we talk about foreign trade of the country during that period of time, it was actually for benefit of Britishers. Whatever trade surplus India was earning out of selling raw materials to Britain, it was itself used by the colonial government to meet its administrative expenses and also its war expenses during that period of time. Nothing was used in the development of Indian economy. So let's move on to our next question. Name some notable economists who estimated India's per capita income during the colonial period. So, who were those economists? Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Desai, V.K.R.V. Rao, William Digby, and Finlayshires. These are the people who estimated, who made individual efforts in the calculation of India's per capita income. Because during that period of time, the British government did not pay any attention in order to estimate India's per capita income. So these were individual efforts by the people. What were the main causes of India's agricultural stagnation during the colonial period? Reasons for stagnation of Indian agriculture. The very important cause of this kind of stagnation was zamindari system or land revenue system, which was introduced in 1793. Under this system, the British government, made zamindars the middlemen to collect the profits from the cultivators, and they need to submit those revenues, those profits to the British government. And in order to remain the landlords or zamindars of that area, they need to do this duty for the Britain government, and they can also collect more than that, more profits than that, which they need to submit to the Britain government. For this, they exploited the cultivators. They resumed the luxurious life to live, and they exploited the cultivators to a large extent. They were allowed to do so by the British government. Second point, they introduced commercialization as we earlier discussed. This also led to the fall of the food grains and fall of the agriculture sector. Lack of irrigation facilities, there were no efforts done in this direction by the British government. Name some modern industries which were in operation in our country at the time of independence. If we talk about the modern industry, there were no efforts made by the British government to set up an industry in the country. There was only Tata Iron and Steel Company, that is TISCO, which was an individual effort by some person, and it was only industry during that period of time which you can term as modern industry. So India witnessed a growth in the textile sector. Next, what was the twofold motive behind systematic deindustrialization affected by the British in pre-independent India? what was their motive for deindustrialization? Because they wanted to make India only supplier of raw material in order to get raw materials for their industries in Britain. Secondly, they wanted to sell their own products, finished goods in the Indian market. So, making India market, they need to destroy the local market, that is handicraft, local industries like handicraft. Next, the traditional handicraft industries were ruined under the British rule. Do you agree with this view? Yes, we obviously agree with this view. Give reasons. Firstly, they introduced a discriminatory tariff policy, means high export tariff on Indian goods, which were sold at the international market, which leads to higher prices of the products, and they were losing their demand in the international market. In this way, they destroyed it by using discriminatory tariff policy. Second point, they were importing British goods, finished goods in India, which was duty free without any taxes. So they could easily compete with the locally produced handicraft goods. This also resulted in the destruction of the complete destruction of the handicraft goods. There were princely states of India who used to provide patronage to these local art handicrafts. But what happened in the Britain rule or British rule? They were ruined. There were no princely states. So they could not provide any kind of help to the local art, local handicrafts, and they were not there to purchase their products, which further decreased the demand of such goods, and slowly the handicrafts lose their entire market. Next question. What objectives did British tend to achieve through their policies of infrastructure development in India? What did they develop? They developed the transportation system and communication system. And in case of transportation, they developed the roads. And they also developed the seaports and railways. The main purpose of this development was to get raw material for the British industries. Then, the second important reason was to control the country by using proper transportation facilities. If there is a revolt in any part of the country, they can send their army by using good transportation, and they can suppress the revolt. Secondly, in case of communications, they develop post and telegraph because they want to be more effective, and they want the British administration in India to coordinate well between themselves. For this, they needed a proper post and telegraph system. This is the only development that was done by the Britishers for their self interest. Shortfalls of industrial policy pursued by the colonial government or British government. What was the main purpose of this thing, that is shortfall of industry policy? To reduce India to the supplier of raw material to British industries. And what did they develop? What did they do for this? They neglected the handicrafts. They in fact destroyed the handicraft industry by putting very high tax on the export tariffs on the handicrafts which were exported in the international market. Then the Indian industries, whatever industry was there, modern industry even was coming up, there was lack of investment. There were lack of money with the people, so British government was not interested in putting any efforts in this direction because they wanted to sell their own products in the Indian market. So this is what they opt for. They destroyed the handicrafts and they put no efforts in the development of the modern industry. What do you understand by the drain of Indian wealth during colonial period? Drain of wealth in the sense that raw materials were taken to the British industries at a very lower prices, and then the same raw material used for the production of finished goods, and these goods were sold in the Indian market, domestic market, at a very higher price. So it caused a drain of Indian wealth. This was the economic policy of the British government, which was specifically designed for their own benefit, and they wanted India to be used only mere exporter of raw materials to Britain, which is regarded as the defining year to mark the demographic transition from its first to second decisive stage. You have to remember this year 1921, year of Great Divide. And you can learn this as a 1 mark question also. It can be asked in your exam. Give a quantitative appraisal of India's demographic profile during the colonial period. This question is about the population of the country. There was high birth rate 48 per thousand, high death rate 40 per thousand. Infant mortality was very high, life expectancy was very low, and the literacy rate was also very low. So all these features tell us that there was poverty, there was lack of standard of living of people, low survival rate was there, and there were extremely bad conditions as far as the situation of the people is concerned. Highlight the silent features of India's pre-independence occupational structure. Before independence, 75% of the population was dependent on agriculture as a source of sustenance, means for their survival. And rest of the people, they were dependent on the manufacturing and service sector. Basically, more of them were engaged in the services, and very less people were engaged in the manufacturing or industries. In fact, it reduced drastically during that period due to the decline of handicraft industry, and there was no modern industry which was established by the government. So India witnessed regional variation also in occupational structure. Some states are more concentration of work in production and manufacturing, and others were in agriculture. If you talk about services, most of the services was there were people who were serving the British government in the administrative offices or in the British Indian Army. And these were the services. Underscore some of India's most crucial economic challenges at the time of independence. Firstly, there was very low agriculture output. There were lack of food grains and situation of starvation in the country. There was no industry in the country, no modern industry except disco. Per capita income, national income was very low. People were having very low standard of living, low life expectancy, and high birth rate, death rate, infant mortality. no health services, unemployment was prevalent in the society. So the situation was very bad at the time of independence. India's first official census was done in 1888 under British Viceroy Lord Mayo. Indicate the volume and direction of trade at the time of independence. So here this question is related to your foreign trade. Basically, most of the trade was with the British government. It was exporter of raw material to it and importer of finished products from Britain. This was the main feature. What were the primary products which were exported? Like sugar, raw, silk, indigo, jute, these were all, like cotton also, these were all the products which were required in the industries in Britain, which were used to make the finished products. So, India was only exporter of raw materials and importer of finished goods. Most of the trade was with Britain, between India and Britain. Suez Canal, through Suez Canal was the route which was opened in 1869. So, lot of time was saved by using this route, and some of the trade was also done with China, Persia, Ceylon. Now, the very last question, which is the positive impacts or contributions made by the Britain or British in India, discuss. If we see, even in these, we can find out some significant or some very little positive impacts, like commercialization of agriculture. Although we were not self-sufficient in food grain production, but it is also important because we were able to analyze the market avenues of growing crops. We were able to understand how we can grow crops to earn more money and which crop will be better for earning more profits. So production just change according to the market requirements. Now India followed. Also, please, in this you in the first point, self-sufficiency is it helped achieve self-sufficiency in food grain production. You should cut this line. You should not put this line in your answer. This is wrong. Second point, India was forced to follow the free trade during British colonial rule. Now, what it helped? It helped to compete with the Britain volume of export increase, but this was also not that positive point, although because it was mere exporter of raw material, but we can say that there was somehow India was open to the process of international trade by the impact of the Britishers. Suez Canal is also very important in this regard. Railways are very important development if you consider so far, because it helped the people to move to distant places and it helps expansion of business also. English language is also a significant impact which give us a global exposure. There was improvement in the monetary system and production due to the division of labor. This is the last point. So, I hope you understand these 16 question answers are given in NCRT, and I hope it brings you clarity, this audio video, for your understanding of NCRT solutions. It may give you a better understanding on the topic in the chapter. So go through it and complete your work given to you. Thank you.